Good morning. When we give someone a gift, before the gift comes the motivation. Why are we giving someone a gift in the first place? So I want you to do just a little mental exercise with me this morning. Okay, wake up if you've drifted off here a little bit. I don't know how you could after listening to Alan, but if just in case, I want you to do a little exercise with me this morning. I want you to think of a gift that you gave to someone recently. Okay, it could be for Christmas, or maybe somebody in your family had a birthday recently. Maybe you've already purchased a gift for Valentine's Day. That is coming up, hint, hint. Okay, so a gift that you purchased, a gift that you got for someone recently. Now, most gifts fall into one of two categories. So the next question is, which category does your gift fall into? Was it a gift of obligation, or was it a gift of honor? Okay, a gift of obligation is the kind of gift that you give to someone who's a family member, or they're always giving you a gift at Christmas, and so you kind of feel obligated to give them a gift in return. Or it's the scenario where your workplace has a Christmas party, and you exchange names, and you get a name of somebody, you're like, I'm not even sure I know who this person is. Don't know anything about them, don't know what they like, and so you get them a Chia Pet. I mean, that's why Chia Pets were invented, is just for events like that, where you have to give something out of obligation, right? Now, the other motivation could be to honor someone because you want to show them that they are special to you. And so when you want to honor someone with a gift, you tend to put a little more effort into it. You think a little bit more about what do I want to get for this person. Maybe you make a little bit more of a sacrifice. You spend time looking for the right thing. Maybe you spend a little bit more money on that object because you want to honor them. The gift that I got this Christmas that was the most honoring to me, this may sound a little strange, but it was this book, The Polar Express. Okay, it was my wife's idea, and my girls were like, we don't know what to get Dad. And so Sherry suggested this to them, and they got it for me. And the reason this was honoring to me is because the movie has become one of my favorite movies at Christmas time, and they knew that about me. And so they said, I think he would enjoy the book. And so now I enjoy looking through this book because I see the pictures, and I'm like, this is what inspired them to do the movie this way. It's just kind of cool. And it wouldn't be special for many of you. You'd be like, why did they give this for me? I'd rather have a Chia Pet, But for me, this was honoring. And it's even got a CD. It's a special edition. It's got a CD in here where Liam Neeson reads the story. I haven't listened to that yet. I'll wait for that for next Christmas. It's also got a commemorative Christmas tree ornament, which is kind of odd because it has the train conductor, and he's like got his mouth wide open, like going like this. And I'm like, I don't think that's making it onto the Christmas tree next year. But I like the book. Anyway, the book was honoring to me. So we're going to talk this morning about how we give gifts to God. And what is our motivation behind the gifts we give to God? Now, for some of you here this morning, this may be a non-issue because maybe you don't give any gifts to God. Maybe you've never given him anything. You don't know how to give him anything because, I can't see him. I can't hand him a present. So how do I give a gift? And even if I did see him or knew how to give him a gift, I'm not sure I would want to. So if you're in that category this morning, then that's fine. Maybe you just listen in. Maybe you pick something up from this morning. But for those of us who do give gifts to God, the question for us this morning is, before the gift, what is the motivation? What is the why? Is it an obligation or is it an honor? Do you feel obligated to give to God? Because if I don't, he might zap me. Or do I give to God to honor him? Because I want to show him that he is special in my life. I want to demonstrate that for him through the gift that I give to him. See, when we honor someone with a gift, it really creates kind of a bond between us. If anyone has ever given you a gift and you felt honored by that, you know how that makes you feel towards that person? Well, God is a person. I think sometimes we forget that. I think sometimes we think he's just kind of off somewhere, busy running the universe. But he is a person, and he loves to be honored and loved just like you and I do. And when you and I make a choice to give God a gift to honor him, to show him that he is special to us, that really moves his heart. He loves that. And it turns out that he turns around and is motivated to do something for us that we really appreciate. So we're going to look at that, how that dynamic works this morning. And here is the kind of the main gist, the main point for you to take away. And we're going to unpack this as we go this morning. God asks something from us, that is the giving part, because he wants something for us. He asks something from us to honor him, but that's because he wants something for us. Let's find out what that means. Would you turn to Proverbs chapter 3? And if you're in the Bibles there at your seat, that's on page 450. We started this series last week talking about balance and talking about bringing balance to our financial situation. And I know sometimes it can be a little bit of a touchy subject, mixing God and money. Sometimes it seems uncomfortable to think, I'm not sure we should be talking about God and money in the same sentence, especially in church, because people start getting a little antsy, like what's he going to ask for and all that kind of thing. But what we saw last week is that when we honor God with our finances, he wants us to flourish financially. He wants us to trust in him so that we can flourish financially. And so this month, we're not just talking about giving, but we're talking about 3 areas of our finances where if we can bring these 3 areas into balance, this is the key to flourishing financially. And so the 3 areas that we introduced last week are to give and to save and then to spend or to live. I heard this put another way this week. This is probably a little bit more memorable. To give, to save, and then to live off the rest. And last week we introduced the idea of making that a 10-10-80 kind of balance. 10% giving, 10% saving, and then 80% live off the rest. So this morning we're going to start with talking about giving because that's where God starts. And in Proverbs 3:9, we begin to learn about this. It says, honor the Lord. There's that word, honor. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Okay, now, let's pause there, okay? I know there's a semicolon and it goes on. Okay, we'll come back and we'll pick up the rest of it in a few minutes. But it starts with honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your produce. Now, we're going to unpack this and we're going to kind of go word by word to understand what this means. The word honor in the Hebrew means to make heavy, to be weighty, okay? So when it says to honor the Lord with your wealth, it's saying don't take God lightly in this area. We want to show that God is weighty to us. He's important to us. And so we honor him with our wealth. We show him value. So it says, honor the Lord with your wealth. And at this point, many of us are breathing a sigh of relief. Well, this is not me. I'm not wealthy. Okay? So we could spend a little while trying to define the word wealth, but really wealth is so subjective. I mean, it's so arbitrary because generally wealth simply means somebody that has more than we do, right? So we're not going to try to define that word. We can just keep on reading and really get to the heart of what's going on here because he says, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. All your produce. So whatever you're producing, much, little, however much it is, honor the Lord with all of it. Now honor him with the first fruits of your produce. Okay, this is farming language. Now, a few of you are farmers. Okay, a few of you can relate to this. I don't know, actually, if any of you actually grow things and live off of that and sell it, and that's what you live off of. I mean, probably there's not a lot of those folks around anymore. So what we have to do is bring this kind of into a little broader context that most of us experience, and that is produce being whatever you're producing by the work that you do during the week or the weekend, whenever you happen to work. And what most of us produce is not crops and food. We produce a paycheck, right? So honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of your produce. Now, before we jump too quick to how this applies for us, let's talk about how it applied for them when they're reading this community of people in Israel who are getting this wisdom. For them, it was crops. For them, it was they had a spot of land that they farmed, and they raised whatever, wheat, corn, whatever, and they would live off of that during the year. They would raise it, they would put it into storage, they would eat some of it now, and they would store some of it for later. And God said, out of that amount of food that you bring in, I want you to bring the first fruits. I want you to bring the first part of it. So that's first as in the first part that you gather, even before you finish all of your harvest. I want you to bring me the first part of it. That's first as in first chronologically. It's also first as in best, the best part of it. He says, don't bring in all of your crops and then give me whatever's left over. I want you to bring me what's first. And so the way they would give that to God is they would bring that to the tabernacle or the temple, to the priests, the people who were serving God, because the priests, the Levites, they didn't have a spot of land to farm, okay? Their work was to serve God and to serve the people who were coming to worship. So they were not farming their land. So the rest of the folks who were farming, they would bring in the first fruits, and that would feed them. Okay, that's how this worked. That's how people would give to God. And God said, I want you to bring me the first fruits of all your produce. So whatever it is, whatever all the different crops are you're bringing in. So for you and I, if we have 2 jobs, 3 jobs, whatever checks are coming into us, whatever paychecks are coming, he says, I want you to honor me with the first fruits. Not out of obligation. I want you to honor me because really all of it comes from him anyway. Really all of it belongs to him anyway. So he says, I want you to bring me the first fruits. And that's an act of trust. That's an act of saying, God, I don't even know how much the rest of my harvest is going to be yet, but I'm going to trust you with the first part of it. I'm going to trust you with the best part of it. I know I've got kids to feed, and I don't want to give them lousy food to eat, but I'm going to trust you with the best part of it. We have a core value as a church that says to give our best. That we don't want to just give God the leftovers. We want to give him the best. And the rest of that description for that core value actually says we want to honor God. We want to serve with excellence and give to God with excellence because it honors him. There's that word honor again. It shows him that he is important to us. So God asks something from us. I mean, make no mistake, this is a sacrifice that he's asking for because it takes trust to give that up, to release that from our hands, because a lot of us feel like, and we're in a place where we're like, I'm not sure, I'm not doing so hot living off 100%. And now you're asking me to live off of 90%. And next week, we're going to talk about saving, so we're going to ask you to live off of 80%. I'm not doing that well living off of 100%. And what I want to suggest to you this morning, and plant the thought, if no one's ever planted this for you before, when you begin to bring your financial picture into balance according to what God is calling us to do, you can live better off of 80% than you can off of 100%. Because it has to do with trust. It has to do with trusting what is God going to help you do with the other 80%. Okay, so what does this look like? Okay, what is it? We've talked about the motivation because we want to honor God. Now, what is the gift? What does it look like? Well, it looks like a regular planned gift. It looks like every time I have produce coming in, then something is going out, something is going back to God. It's regular, it's planned. Every harvest for the people who are in the farming community, every paycheck for you and I who are producing something like a paycheck instead of a crop. As a church, we do this. We have 3 different organizations that we give to regularly. So every month, whatever, and it's a percentage. It's based on whatever is coming in. So Spring of Hope, Waynesboro Community and Human Services, and there's one more. Thank you. Pregnancy Ministries. All right, so a percentage of our income goes right out to them based on whatever is coming in. We do that in faith, not because we don't have needs and places where that money could go inside here at church, but we say, no, we don't want to just be receiving all the time. We also want to be giving. We want to be putting it out. So how much? Okay, that's the next question. And the Old Testament tells us it uses tithe over and over again. It says the tithe is the standard. Actually, the tithe is the beginning point. You may have heard that word before. Tithe literally just means 1/10. Okay? So one example of a verse is Leviticus 27:30. It says, every tithe of the land, whether the seed of the land or the fruit of the trees, is the Lord's. It is holy to the Lord. Do you notice how it says that the tithe is the Lord's? So in a sense, we really aren't even giving it back to him. What we're doing is we're giving it. We're not giving him something that is ours in a sense. We're giving it because it is his. It is the Lord's. So as we give that 1/10 back, that's his. And so we release it and we honor him with that. Now there are some people who argue and say that's in the Old Testament. That's for these people who are growing crops. That's in Leviticus. That's old stuff. But Jesus actually reaffirms the tithe in Matthew 23:23. He's talking to the religious leaders of the day, and he says, you tithe mint and dill and cumin. Okay, so that's some of their produce. Even the tiniest pieces of their produce, even their spices, they tithe. He said, you tithe these things and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. These you ought to have done, the justice and mercy and faithfulness, without neglecting the others. There are some people today that argue that we just need to focus on the justice and the mercy and the faithfulness. And the tithe is kind of old. We don't need to do that anymore. But Jesus said, no, we need to do the justice, the mercy, the faithfulness. But don't lose sight of the tithe because it belongs to God. It's the beginning. It belongs to God. So the tithe is really the baseline. It's really the beginning. Because even in the Old Testament, it's not like, okay, I've given my 1/10 and I'm done, and the rest of it is mine, and I can do whatever I want with it. Even in the Old Testament, there were other offerings that people would give. They would give just thanks offering. God, I'm thankful, and I'm going to give back to you. Or they would have a temple that they were building, and they would call for supplies and materials, and people would give towards that. And so the tithe was really just the beginning. And tithe, the 10%, I know for some of you, you may be thinking, there's no way in my situation right now I can carve out 10%. And that may be true, okay? I'm not going to argue that from up here because I don't know your particular situation. But if 10% sounds like a lot, then here's a little something to give you perspective. Someone shared this with me a couple of years ago, and I thought this was priceless. He said he was talking with a family member, and they said, 10% feels like so much when I'm asked to give it, but when I go to the store and there's a sale, and it's 10% off, I'm going, is that the best you can do? I mean, this needs to be like a 20%, 30%. When we get to 20, 30%, then we're talking about a sale. I mean, that's something on sale, right? 10%, man, that's nothing. Isn't it interesting how our perspective changes based on whether it's coming in or whether we're spending it on ourselves or we're spending it on God? See, God asks something from us, and it is sacrificial because he wants something for us. That's what we find out as we go on and read the next verse here in Proverbs 3. See, let's start with 9 again. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. Okay? Remember, again, we're talking a farming context here. So he says, I want you to give out of the first of your produce, and then the storage places where you store the rest of your produce, they're going to be full. They're going to be overflowing. If you will trust me with the first fruits, then I will take care of you. If you will give to me first, I will take care of you. When you honor me, I will take care of you. See, here's what happens. Here's what these verses are telling us. God is calling us to a financial partnership. God is calling us to partner with him. And he says, if you will honor me by faith, I will take care of you. I will take care of your needs. If you will honor me, I will enter into a partnership. If you don't want to do that, that is your choice, then you're on your own. But you don't have to be on your own anymore financially. You can trust me to provide for your needs, but I need you to honor me. I need you to show some trust and some faith up front. This is the message of a prophet of the Old Testament. You don't have to turn here, but you can just listen as I read this to you. The last prophet of the Old Testament, Malachi chapter 3. He tells us that just as it is possible for you and I to honor God with our money, it is also possible to dishonor God with our money by withholding that tithe. And he calls it robbing. Malachi 3 verse 8 says, will man rob God? Yet you are robbing me, God says. But you say, how have we robbed you? And God says, in your tithes and contributions. You are cursed with a curse, for you are robbing me, the whole nation of you. And he says, bring the full tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. And, okay, we'll pause there for just a second. He says, you're robbing me. You're robbing me, and there's a curse on you. I mean, one of the reasons why our country and our homes are in such financial disarray is that we have robbed from God by withholding from him what rightfully belongs to him. And so he says, I can't bless you. I would love to bless you, and we'll get to that in a second. I would love to bless you financially. I would love to fill your storehouses and take care of your needs, but I can't do that because you are withholding from me what is rightfully mine. And we're not in a partnership. You're just doing it on your own, and you're kind of doing it yourself, and you're messing it up. And so he says, here's the challenge for you. God lays out this challenge. He says, thereby put me to the test, says the Lord of hosts, if I will not open the windows of heaven for you and pour down for you a blessing until there is no more need. Do you have needs in your financial picture? Are you able to say, there is no need in my house? Maybe one of the reasons why there is need in your house is because you have not honored him with the first fruits. He says, you have robbed from me. I mean, none of us would think about going and snatching somebody's purse, mugging somebody out in the parking lot. Nobody, I hope you wouldn't think about that. If you would, then let's talk about that afterwards, and let me pray for you. But most of us would not think of doing something like that. But in the privacy of our own financial picture, our own situation, we rob from God by withholding from him. And he says, I want to bless you, and you're cutting yourself off from the blessing. You're not entering into partnership with me. See, God asks something from us because he wants something for us. He wants a partnership. Do you realize what he's offering? He's saying you do not have to be alone anymore dealing with your finances. You don't have to worry. You don't have to worry ever again about a need that you have, because he's promising to supply your need. Now let's be very clear, okay? This is what he said at the end of Malachi. He said, I will pour a blessing for you until there's no more need. Okay, he didn't say want. He said need, okay? And in Proverbs 3, if you still got that open in front of you, he said, your barns will be filled with plenty. Your vats will be bursting with wine, okay? The things that we need to eat, and for them, wine was a staple, a part of their nutrition that they were taking in. I mean, this is not all the wants, okay? He didn't say your garage will be filled with a BMW, okay? Now, if you want to hear that, if you want to hear that, if you give to God, then you can't outgive him and he's going to give you all this wonderful stuff. If you want to hear about the luxury houses and cars and whatever, you'll have to go somewhere else to hear that, because I'm not talking about that. What I see consistently through the Bible is God promising to meet our needs. Jesus said in Matthew 6, he said, seek first his kingdom, and all these things, which he was just talking about, food and clothing, all these things will be added to you as well. I mean, that's what he's promising, is to meet our needs. So the good news is, God promises to meet our needs when we honor him, when we put him first. And that's an act of faith. This is not about obligating God to do something for us. Please realize, please understand, we cannot obligate God to do anything for us. God owes no man anything, but God says graciously, I will enter into partnership with you if you will trust me. If you will start with the first fruits, if you will release your grasp on that, then we can start talking. Then I will meet your need, and I will fill your storehouses. So the first step in balance is to look at our giving. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking about this point. Okay? Nobody's doing this, so I'm caricature here, but you're sitting there thinking, I know what this guy's up to. The giving is down. That parking lot's a mess. They're saying give to these needs, okay? All right, if that's what you're thinking. This message is not about giving to CrossWalk Church. This message is about giving to God. This is about honoring God. And to prove to you that that's the case, if you have not been applying this, if you've not been giving, and you want to walk out of here today, and I hope that you walk out of here today saying, I need to start applying this, then give it to someone else. Give it to another church that you know is doing God's work, please, okay? Give it to a ministry that you know is solid. I mean, you don't have to give it here, because what I want for you is to experience the partnership, experience the bond that happens when you give to God to honor him, and then he begins to work in your financial picture. That's what I want you to experience. This is not about CrossWalk getting more money in our bank account. This is about you experiencing God at work in your financial picture and bringing it into balance. So I hope that you would walk out of here today saying, okay, I'm going to give the first fruits. I'm going to plan it. I'm going to do it regularly. I'm going to give. I'm going to move towards 10%. It may well be that you can't walk out of here today and say, I'm doing the full 10%. I'm doing that full thing right now. Maybe you just are not able. Maybe you've gotten yourself into a situation, or life has gotten you into a situation where you're just like, I can't do that right now. But what I want to encourage you to do is start somewhere. Start with a percentage, not a random amount every paycheck. Start with a percentage. And what we have done, what my wife and I have done over the years, is we've started at a percentage that was lower than 10, and we have worked our way up, and now we're beyond the 10. And so that's what you can do. I mean, when you do it incrementally, then you can bite that off and you can chew it. And God starts to work with you as you act in faith, because you're saying, I want to honor you, God. with my finances. Now, a couple of just practical things, to realize and think about as we talk about this. The first is that the more you have, the harder this is. That probably seems a little odd, but it's like there's a story that's told of a young man who came to his pastor, and he said he was making $40 a week. And so he said, Pastor, I'm going to vow from this point forward, I'm going to tithe. I'm going to give a tenth of that. So I'm going to give my $4 every week. This young man was pretty ambitious, and so within a couple of months, he was making $500 a week. So he comes back to Pastor and says, Pastor, can I be released from my vow? He said, this is just, it's too much. It's too hard for me to do this tithe. And the pastor said, well, I'm not sure about releasing you from your vow, but if you want, we can pray that your income would go back to $40 a week, because then you'd be able to manage the tenth. See, the more we have, sometimes the harder it is to let go of it. But the statistics show that this is true, that people, the more their income grows, the smaller their percentage becomes. So just be aware of that. Be aware that will be challenging. And just start wherever you are. And then as your income grows, hopefully, over the years, at least from standard of living increases, as your income grows, it's easier to let go of it because you've already established that foundation. Another practical thing is, the question comes up, should I tithe off of my net or my gross? So I had that question this week from someone. And so I've always heard it answered this way. Do you want to be blessed in the net, or do you want to be blessed in the gross? And so that's one answer. Another way to look at that is really to say that your gross, some of you don't even know what gross is, the gross is, it sounds gross. I don't know if that's good or bad. The gross is like everything, like before your taxes come out, before your health insurance, if your employer pays that. That gross amount is truly your compensation. That's truly your produce. Because your employer, if they take out your taxes, they're really kind of doing you a favor. They could just leave that in there, and then, I know it doesn't feel like a favor, but they're taking it out for you, because then you would have to pay that yourself every quarter. You have to send that in to the government. So they're kind of just, making that a little bit easier for you. That's really still truly part of your produce. So it's just something to think about. But again, as you're thinking about percentages and working towards what God has called us to. And then the third thing, practically speaking, is this is really counterintuitive. I realize it's counterintuitive to think in terms of giving something away. Typically, if I give something away, I have less, right? I give it away, it's gone. And God says, no, what I'm asking you to give something. I'm asking something from you because I want something for you. Because when we hold on to things, one thing that's happening is I'm holding on to what I think is mine, but the other thing is my hands are not open to receive what God is wanting to put in them. And God says, open your hands and let go, because I'm wanting to put something back in there for you. He's asking something from us because he wants something for us. I'm praying that some of you will take God's challenge. There's not very many times where God says, put me to the test. And this is one where he says, I want you to put me to the test. You're going to know, this is a way to know tangibly, is God going to work in my life or not? If I take the step of faith to release back to him and honor him. And so I'm praying that some of you will take that challenge, and that some of you will have stories to tell. We've got a story to tell this morning. Sarah, if you would come up and join me. Sarah Lincoln and her husband, Jason, are leading a small group here, and they actually went through a financial small group a number of months ago here. And so she shared a story with me. If you want to come over here and have a seat. She shared a story with me this week that I thought was such a great illustration of what we're talking about here this morning. So would you share that with all of us?
As you said, I'm Sarah. And my husband and I, we are a dual income family. And when we got out of grad school about 5 years ago, we learned pretty quickly how chaotic marriage and life can be if you're not really balanced in your finances when you're getting that paycheck. So we really made it a point to I was thinking of the verse before we even got here today. I didn't know you were going to use that verse, but Proverbs 3:9, and just all that it says for us to do, and honor God with your wealth and your first fruits instead of at the end. So we made it a point to, when we get our paychecks, just kind of sort it out and put money into savings, put money into bills. And then we also, when we take money for bills out, we made it a point to take our tithing money out, whether we were going to give that to the church or to different missions organizations. And that way we didn't miss it at the end and by the time the next paycheck rolled around. And so a couple years ago, we were actually out of town for a conference in Canada, of all places. And we got a really frantic phone call from our neighbors who were house/dog sitting. And they told us that not only was our yard completely flooded, that our basement was flooding as well. And so needless to say, we cut our conference trip in half, and we came home early. And we'd only been in our house for not even a year at that point. And on the long drive home, I went back and I was thinking about the realtor going through that pile of paperwork that you go through when you close on a house. And I remember he specifically looked at me saying, "Well, you don't live on a floodplain, therefore you're not eligible for flood insurance." And I kept going over that in my mind, thinking, "Oh my goodness, what are we going to do here?" And so, long story short, we had somebody come in to renovate and clean up and to actually re-waterproof the basement to ensure that it wouldn't flood again. And it got pretty pricey. When all was said and done, it was about $7,000 to do everything that they had to do. And luckily, we had an emergency credit card that we put it on. And but still, we were thinking, "Oh my gosh, that's a huge sum that we weren't expecting, and how are we going to pay this?" Well, since we were out of town for the conference, our tithing money kind of stayed in our account that weekend. And by the time the next paychecks rolled around, we were kind of faced with thinking, okay, should we do what we had been doing and take that money and, put it into tithing or whatever we were, going to, and put it towards a church or whatever organization we were going to put it towards, or should we try to pay off that balance a little faster? And we wrestled with it a little bit, and after a lot of praying, we came to the conclusion that we needed to give God that money because it wasn't ours. And so the next Sunday, we ended up tithing the full amount, which was double what we normally did to make up for it. And we were okay with that. We were thinking, we don't know how long it's going to take us to pay down that balance, but we had faith that we would. And literally 2 days later, we were at work, and we got a phone call from our insurance company saying that for some overflow coverage, I'm not sure what that means, but I was happy about it. But they were going to be sending us a check for $7,500, and it covered the cost of repairing the basement and then some. And I'm a firm believer that God answers prayers. It may not be as very apparent as that, and may not be the way He wants us to answer, or we want Him to answer our prayers, but He does. I remember driving home in my car that day, just thanking the Lord aloud and thinking, this is a huge example of, just kind of letting go of our earthly ways to want to hold on to things and take control of our lives when truly we need to trust Him in everything we do. And luckily, since then, we haven't really had a huge sum, or a financial burden come across us like that. But any little things that come along in everyday life, we're constantly reminded of that situation where, we fully trusted in Him and He really provided.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And, that is so dramatic. That's a dramatic example. All of your examples are not going to, everyday life is not always quite that dramatic. But I'm praying that as many of us step out in faith and take God up on His challenge, that we'll have some of those dramatic things happening so that, like you can look back on those. And so give God a chance. I'd say take him up on his challenge, and you may have a story like that as well. If you do, I would love to hear it. We'd love to be able to share more of those stories to encourage one another, just to trust God in faith. So thank you, Sarah, for coming. Let's pray, and then we're going to sing one more song before we leave this morning. Father, thank you for thank you for being with us. Thank you for caring for our whole life. God, you don't just care about the part of our lives where we come to church on Sunday, but you care about even the nuts and bolts of everyday life and our finances. And thank you that you are so generous and so gracious that you want to do good for us. And Father, I pray for those this morning who may be in a very strapped, difficult financial place. And I pray you give them wisdom to understand how to apply this and how they might act in faith and begin to test you. And then, Lord, I pray that you would just, in a dramatic way, just honor any faith that they show to you in honoring you. And Lord, we thank you for your generosity in not only providing for our daily needs, but in providing your Son, Jesus, to wash away our sins. And Lord, we're just grateful for your work in our lives. Please bring greater and greater measures of balance to our financial lives so we can honor you and just enjoy the life that you have given us. And we pray these things in Jesus' name.